the informed investor. Thanks to Century 21. Smarter, bolder, faster. Go to century21.com.au.
Their chairman is Charles Tarby. He joins us every Monday night. Great to have you with us again.
Yeah, good evening, Steve.
Housing market seems to be all over the shop. Sydney and auction clearance rates seems to be bouncing back. And yet in the other big city of Australia, Melbourne, I'm not quite sure what's happened in Brisbane. Melbourne and Brisbane are looking a bit sick.
It's really a strange situation. Obviously, people are still talking the market down, and it is certainly declining in certain areas price-wise, even though nowhere near as massively as one would expect. But 61.3% with 799 auctions. I mean, this time last year they had 1,088 auctions, but I think this is a sign of the times. When the market's a little tougher, not as many people go to auction because there's not that heat there and people bidding in a crazy manner. So I expect the auction numbers to be low, but those clearance rates are very healthy for Sydney.
They are very healthy for Sydney. So that seems to have had a quick bounce back. I mean, I don't know what the prices are like and whether people are still getting the prices they want, but to have that number, up in over 60% again is pretty high.
Yes, and it's done that 3 out of 4 weeks out of the last 4 weeks.
So it's a trend.
It's a trend. This time last year it was 62.4%. So it's actually pretty much on par. Look, Steve, the biggest issue, and it came out in a report I saw from CoreLogic, it seems very, very clear, although the prices did go higher than they should have a year and a half ago, it seems very clear that APRA's involvement in the real estate industry with lending, the banks, the Royal Commission, has definitely had an impact. I mean, they pulled investors back, if you remember. They told all the banks you can only lend, you only have a book with X percentage number of investors. They started making it harder to get fixed loans, so the interest rates were higher. So there are a number of factors that came into play to slow the market down. It's worked. And it's probably what we're seeing now is the end result of that, not this crash that, again, people keep talking about.
The Housing Industry Association, Charles, have done some interesting research. The one that caught my eye is that over 92% of people who rent will still aspire to own their own home. So the great Australian dream of owning your own house still well and truly alive.
Yeah, that's a wonderful stat because Australia is probably leads the way in the world in terms of people wanting to buy property. In other countries around the world, it's probably not so easy to buy property. But to have a statistic like that says 92% of renters aspire to own a property, aspire being the key word, it's a wonderful thing. And I think we need this industry to keep going. We need the building industry to keep going. We've had a lull in most capital cities, but having this sort of feel out there is a very, very good thing.
That 92% figure, it mentions houses. Is that a generic term for all of some real estate? They're not all saying that they want to buy a quarter-acre block. It's a house or a unit or an apartment, right?
I think we've become accustomed to an apartment now. I mean, we used to call them flats, if you remember, Steve. And,
yes.
And if all you could afford was a flat, it meant you were right at the bottom of the ladder. But nowadays, they're called apartments or units. And I think that people are quite comfortable living in them, and they can be. Because there's a lot more services around nowadays around these apartment centres. So I think it's either houses or apartments. But in some of the areas across the country, you can still buy property for very, very cheap prices. I was looking at one that we have advertised in the Home Beautiful magazine, which is coming out shortly. We have a section in there for C21, and I saw this little terrace, brand new terrace-style property. So they're brand new, 214,000 in South Australia in the Elizabeth sector. How does that happen? How do people get to prices that low? And we're talking about a 2-bedroom with living area and a garage.
Yeah, that's a bargain. I mean, Elizabeth is north of Adelaide, and you'd have a commute. But if you could get a job in the local area, that would be something that you'd either want to buy or you could invest in. I mean, Elizabeth's gone through a rocky patch with Holden shutting down and manufacturing industry shutting down. But if those defence industry jobs end up being as promised in South Australia, that might not be a bad investment for someone.
And how interesting is it that Adelaide, Canberra and Brisbane are the 3 capital cities that have been bucking the trend where Melbourne and Sydney have been going backwards. Those 3 capital cities have had actual capital growth.
75% of Australians in the same survey say it's more difficult now to buy a home than it was 10 years ago. Well, I don't that surprises anybody.
No, it doesn't, and that really does go back to look. Affordability is still an issue, and buying property, what we just talked about in Adelaide, that shouldn't be too hard. But banks it's so tight. I've never seen it this way. I've never seen interest rates this low, and I've never seen banks asking so many more questions than they used to ask.
Well, they've been spooked, haven't they?
I think they have, definitely. And sadly, the Royal Commission has impacted on the wrong people. When they were trying to chase the banks down to get them to do a better job, it's impacted on the basic basic buyer out there because it's made it very, very hard for them. And the people that are supposed to benefit from this Royal Commission are really the ones that are suffering right now.
And we're starting to hear anecdotal evidence that people being asked to renegotiate their loan from interest-only payment to interest in principal are sometimes having trouble.
That's right, because the valuations have changed as well. And if you're in a declining market, your valuers are going to be marking your property down. So all of a sudden, the equity you thought you had doesn't exist. But it still comes back down to affordability, and they are checking some extraordinary things. Tolls, I think we spoke about this last week, Netflix, they're checking everything about your lifestyle.
Yeah, it seems very onerous what the banks are now doing to people. It's making it very hard, and they've had that impact. Maybe we're going to have to see another interest rate cut before we're over with all of this. Charles, thank you very much, mate. It's a pleasure as always. I'll talk to you next week.
Thank you.
Charles Tarby, chairman of Century 21, talks a lot of sense.
Luxury Escapes brings you the world's best holidays at unbeatable prices. Luxury Escapes works with the world's most loved brands in travel so that you can experience the best new hotels, the best tours and cruises with flexible bookings. And when you travel with Luxury Escapes, every package comes with VIP extras, giving you 5-star treatment. Great deals, amazing places. Find your next holiday at luxuryescapes.com.